Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of Now in ENC. And today's special guest is the Superintendent of Hyde County Schools, and he's going to tell us about an exciting pilot program that's going on within his school district that could affect the rest of North Carolina. All right, so let's get right into our interview. Give us background on what the pilot programs are, because we talked about this, I believe, 2 months ago, and we talked about Starlink because a lot of people were asking questions regarding what are these not spaceships, but what are these satellites in the sky, and what are they supposed to how why are they in Hyde County, why are they over us, etc. So can you tell us a little bit first about the Starlink pilot program, and then let's go into the rest of the programs.
So we have 47 units, okay, and they are Starlink from SpaceX, or satellite connections. And essentially, what's happening is you've got a grid of low orbit satellites. Right now, I believe there's something like 1,200 satellites in orbit, and they're planning something like 12,000. And so the difference between, say, television satellite connections and what Starlink is doing is with the television satellite connection, you're shooting at a specific satellite, and as it moves, there can be times when the signal is weaker. And so what they're doing with Starlink is they're taking that signal and they're putting a satellite in range so that every time one satellite moves out of range, another satellite moves into range. So you just really ping from one satellite to the next, sort of like a train. And each of the satellites are train poles. And those satellites continue in low Earth orbit around the planet. And you link up to one every time it goes overhead. And so eventually, when they have all the satellites up, if you imagine like a fishing net, and each of the satellites will be where the knots of the net are. So some satellites will be going this way, while other satellites are going that way, and they'll cross and make your signal a lot stronger and consistent.
How long has this program been, not only the Starlink program, but also the other two, or I believe there's three programs altogether, but how long have these efforts to provide internet access in rural areas, how long has this kind of been going on for?
Well, it really started in earnest, obviously, last March, when we went virtual in school. And the reason that we did that, well, let me give you a little background. When I first came to Hyde, having grown up in Eastern North Carolina, I was well aware of the problems that weather caused in school systems. I attended school in Dare County when I was growing up, and my dad was a superintendent in Dare County, and there was a many a morning that he was out driving around Dare County, checking the tides, how high the tide was getting, whether we had snow, checking the roads to make sure it was safe. And so weather has really, been a factor in schooling in Eastern North Carolina for a very long time. In my previous job, we started really looking at the possibility of being able to go virtual anytime we had a weather day. That way we wouldn't miss any instruction time. So instead of kids just, getting the day off, they would wake up in the morning and the wind was blowing or the tide was up or we had some snow and we still have power, then they would automatically know that we were going virtual that day if we had canceled school, and they wouldn't miss any instruction time. And it was working really well with some of the pilots that we were trying in my previous position. So when I came to Hyde, knowing Oak and its vulnerability as well as Mainland High, we started putting some of these things in place right after I arrived here. The ability to go virtual, and we had virtual planning. We had the students understanding that if we were virtual, because they were one-to-one, they'd get up, check their email. It was a virtual day. Then their assignments would be sent to them. And all of that was in place. And then March rolls around, and the week that schools closed, we had a plan for the following week. We were going to come to school, work day on Monday, the following week, and then come back to school on Tuesday and sort of review how that went. Was everybody able to log in? Did they have all the addresses that they need to do the work? And then we were going to a virtual again on Wednesday, come back on Thursday again and review and sort of iron out all the issues. For example, do you have a password? Do you know what your password is? Can you log in? And so that was our plan for the following week. And when the governor held the press conference on Friday, and he said, we're not going to close schools, we were like, yes. So we were going to implement the plan the following week. And then we got up Saturday morning to find out that on Saturday he closed schools. So we sort of had to do this cold turkey. What we found out very quickly is we were looking at sort of the wrong demographic, because the demographic that we were looking at in Hyde County is how many students have access to the internet. And that number was sort of, it was 65% had access to the internet. But what we found out that following week was we were asking the wrong question. The question we needed to ask was, how many have access to usable internet? And what we found out was that number was extremely low. We were in the 80% range. And so that created a problem for us immediately, and we had to find a solution to that problem. Mm-hmm. And that solution was, if we don't have internet access, we need to get internet access. So we started looking for multiple outlets that we could possibly use to do our internet access, and again find out from trial and error that there was not one answer, and we turned to multiple solutions. One of those being SpaceX on Okeechobee Island, one of those being TV white space on the mainland, and partnering with River Street Networks in Beaufort County. And the other one is line of sight that River Street is also using on the main. So we're sort of attacking this from three different directions, literally flying the plane while we're building.
Mm-hmm. And so the findings from the past year, from when COVID hit and students had to basically go virtual, have you noticed any significant change in the outcome of student performance? I know it's impacted a lot of students negatively, but how have you seen the students' performance and what they can do within the past year? Has there been any direct impact, or is there still kind of like long-term, this is kind of a long-term, we need to review this, and then maybe in 5 years we can see how this impacted students in our area?
Great question. So what we were able to do was we were able to partner with the Friday Institute, who wanted to do a study on internet connectivity. So in connecting with them, they're actually sending out speed tests and a series of questions to each of our students that we connect, both in Okeechobee and on the main. And they're going to compile that data. And the first survey has just been compiled. They just released a report to the General Assembly like 2 weeks ago. So that data is just starting to come in. I think we'll get a lot better data in the fall, because we're currently using it with our summer school program right now. But the more we ask the questions, the better the data is going to get. Mm-hmm. So as far as impacting instruction right now, it's probably too early to be able to answer that question, but we are starting to see more and more connectivity. And let me put it this way. A lot of the families that we're dealing with, typically in their homes, they don't have standalone computers. Basically, they have a cell phone. And all their internet connectivity comes from that cell phone, whether they go online using the cell phone or whether they use the cell phone as a hotspot. One of our initial programs when we started last spring was to provide hotspots to as many people as we possibly could. And we did that through several different grants and routes. And what we found out was, if you don't have internet access, then having a hotspot to connect to no internet access is not going to be your language. So we learned early on that just reaching out and saying, here, this will connect to the internet, probably wasn't the way to go. We find out that there were 2 cell towers in Hyde County on the mainland and one on Okeechobee. And that means that we've got, if you're closer to the towers, you've got better access. But the further away you get from the towers, and one of them, I believe, is Verizon, the other is US Cellular, It's dependent on where you are and where you're located. And so one of the biggest factors that we saw very early on when we started providing some access to the internet was that we were providing access to the internet to homes that simply did not have it at all. So if you don't know what you're missing, you really don't know what you have when you first log on. So this is a new and evolving thing for Hyde County. We want to be able to do this for everyone in Hyde County, but we had to start somewhere. So we started with students and staff.
Mm-hmm. And Hyde County is one of the very few counties in the state piloting these kind of programs. How are these programs being funded?
Grant funded, basically. The majority of this funding came through Friday Institute. They were actually able to write 2 grants. And Swain County is also using some of this grant funding. And I believe Hyde Co is involved in the pilot. And so this is all, we're literally on the tip of the spear. What they're able to do was they were able to get some grant funding and then provide that grant funding to us to bring in the technology that we needed. That's going to, in Hyde County, it's going to provide, for example, in Oak Bay, the Starlink units for each of the homes, they call them dishes, the little satellites and the modems for each of the houses, and a year's worth of internet access is also included in the grant. On the mainland, we're providing a year's worth of TV white space and the monthly fee for access to that TV white space as well. So both of those being a pilot program is allowing the Friday Institute to collect the data from that program and see the impact that we're really having. How is it really affecting homework gap or just the ability to go log on?
Right, and these pilot programs were kind of pushed out of necessity, but I think when we were talking earlier in the year about these programs is the fact that this is inevitably where education was going. And I know that because of the pandemic, a lot of people are realizing that they can use technology to work independently from home. Do you see the future in that for Hyde County, or where do you see this kind of new space that we're exploring as technology becomes more and more common and zooming in and doing kind of virtual homework is the norm?
Well, I don't know that I see it replacing going to work. And I think that's sort of always been a fear that robots are going to replace it. I just don't see that happening. But as a tool, we've been talking about technology in schools for a long time. Hyde County was a one-to-one school, but that did us absolutely no good because as soon as the students left campus, they couldn't log on. So we had kids with Chromebooks in their hands that really couldn't use them unless they were at school. What we've done is we've expanded that learning environment. Initially, we called it Schools Without Walls because we literally took that classroom and put it anywhere the student was as long as they could log on to the internet. And so as far as equity goes, if you have students across North Carolina who are being able to log on to the internet at home and complete homework assignments, do group projects, interact with one another or collaborate with a teacher, and then you have students, particularly in Northeast North Carolina and in the mountain areas that can't log on when they're at home. That's not equitable. That's not fair. What that means is there are some students in North Carolina that are having access to an education that other students simply can't access. And we're trying to level the playing field. We want all of our students, and particularly in Northeast North Carolina, to have access to education no matter where they're.
Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to a few of the other counties that might want to be using these kind of programs, have you had any other superintendents ask you questions, or what are the future for other counties adopting programs like these?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of what we're doing right now. What we're doing on a statewide level is we're the trial and error. We literally are the pilot. If we can find that it works and can be duplicated, then we can take this to Hertford County or Bertie or anywhere else that's having the same issues that we're having, and they don't have to go through all the levels of trial and error that we've been through. We can sort of say, okay, here's what worked, here's why it worked, here's what we did, and we can replicate that anywhere that they need access. And there's lots of different challenges. For example, in the mountains, if you're on one side of the mountain and the antenna for your broadband is on the other side of the mountain, you're having a hard time getting access. We don't have that problem in eastern North Carolina because the majority of the topography in Hyde County is flat. But the problem that we have is trees. For example, a point-to-point internet access is a beam that is very, very fine. And what we find is that beam will not pass through a pine needle. So pine trees really tear up that kind of technology. And if you look outside, North Carolina is pine trees. And so what we're also piloting is the TV white space, which is a much broader signal, so that when it gets to that one needle, it actually goes around the needle and has a lot less interference. So we can shoot that greater distances and to more people. But having said that, point to point, or if you can see where the beam is coming from, then you have access to a certain kind of internet. And River Street is actually doing that in Englewood. They've got some broadcast signals that are going out from the water tower in Englehart that are actually going point to point. They're going from the water tower directly to a house, and there's a modem pulling that signal down. But the houses that are too far away and they don't have line of sight of that water tower, that's where we're using this TV white space, and we're sending that signal out on unused cable signals, not cable wire, but cable signals. And we can send that right now. We've had it about 4.5 miles, 5 miles. We're hoping to get to about 6 miles. And then we can boost the signal from there and even send it further. Working with River Street, working with Final Mile Communication, working with SpaceX and Starlink, all these new technologies are learning and evolving as we're using them in Hyde County.
Mm-hmm. And this will be my last question, but I believe it's more of a comment. But I know these are being piloted specifically for schools right now, but I can only imagine the impact it can have for local businesses who can use this technology to kind of evolve their businesses and growth, and because I feel the majority of businesses are on social media. They use that as their marketing platforms, and sometimes it's difficult. And some of the payment methods also, you have to have like internet access to tap your phone so you can pay, for example. I don't know if you have any other kind of comments on how this technology can be used and expanded outside of schools, but still within the same county.
Oh, absolutely. Our farming community, they're struggling to come up with their own internet access so they can do a lot of work that they have to do. Farming used to be you go out in the fields and you dig rows and you plant something and then you harvest it. There's tons of technology involved in farming now, and having access to that technology, particularly in our farms in Hyde County, tremendous asset. And so they're having to create their own ways of getting access to the internet. And what we're hoping is this will fill a void. I do have something exciting going on right now. Just to let you know, one of the things that we've learned, and I mentioned this a while ago, is the TV white space is sort of limited to distance, 4.5 to 6 miles, and going across Hyde County, 50 miles from one end to the other. That's going to take a lot of effort to bridge those signals every 4 to 6 miles. We are currently looking at the possibility of bringing SpaceX over to the mainland, particularly on the west end of the county, the end that borders both the county, because that's so far from what we're doing in Englehart right now. But it's ideal for the SpaceX technology because that will allow the homes, the students, and the staff in those areas to log on with SpaceX directly to a satellite. And yes, we want to expand this to every resident in Hyde County. We're working with our county government on this latest pilot with the SpaceX technology in the western end of the county. SpaceX has just opened those cells for us to be able to do that. So their regulations are evolving as we're doing this as well. And hopefully we can sort of replicate what we're doing in Oklahoma on the western end of Hyde County, where they have very little internet access at all, and then expand that to our residents and to our businesses and to our farms, to help everyone. And that's the goal. I mean, this is we just went through a pandemic where people would go online and order things for their homes and have them shipped to the front door, and it made it really simple. And we don't have the ability to do that, and we want all of our residents to have.
Well, fascinating stuff. I'm just intrigued by any sort of developments when it comes to internet access, especially in this area, because when I first moved here, I didn't realize how necessary internet is just to have everyday to function in modern society. So it's just amazing to hear about these efforts, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me today and to kind of give these efforts a spotlight, because it's incredibly fascinating, and it's one of the very few counties that are practicing or piloting programs like these, and that is just so cool that it's here in Eastern North Carolina.
We're very proud of
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in Hyde County right now. And we're even more honored that they're going to be able to take what we're doing and replicate it in areas that don't have internet access just like we do. There's a current program right now in North Carolina where you can get assistance. I think it's $50 a month to help pay your internet access, and that's tremendous. But if you don't have internet access, that doesn't help. And so that even sending out programs where financially people can benefit. What are you paying for? And internet access is expensive. So we're also in discussion with these companies about, can we create like an educational tier in your pricing range so that when we get these programs in place and they become commonplace throughout Eastern North Carolina, that it's affordable. So, it's not just about going out and making it happen, but it's making it accessible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, those are all the questions that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much to our viewers for tuning into this segment of Now in ENC. We'll see you next time.